Hello and welcome to another episode of your AKT Podcast, which is hosted by wellmedic.co.uk. In this podcast, we're going to continue on a very similar theme to our last scenario, which was of polyuria, and for that we're going to use the very same presentation as well. So you have a 24-year-old patient who presents to you with a several-month history of needing to pass lots of urine. She also complains of feeling incredibly thirsty, often drinking between 3 to 4 litres of water. You conduct an initial set of blood tests, which has a normal full blood count, use and ease, bone profile, normal HbA1c and LFTs, and you do a urine dip, which is also normal. You then progress on to doing urine osmolality, and the urine osmolality is low at 650, whereas a normal urine osmolality would be in excess of 800. Now, what would be the next line investigation for this patient? Now, this is quite typical of the AKT in the sense that it's not just asking you to think about whether or not you're going to refer to secondary care, but really to have a thought process as to what the diagnostic or next line investigation would be for this patient. So, if we go back to our last pod, our differential was either cranial diabetes insipidus, nephrogenic diabetes insipidus, or psychogenic polydipsia. Now, the easiest step here at this stage would be to try and differentiate between the diabetes insipidus and the psychogenic polydipsia. Now, ultimately, you want to see if stopping the patient from drinking too much will normalize the urine concentration and thus improve their urine osmolality to normalize it above that 800 mark. The issue with doing this in primary care was if somebody's been drinking lots and lots for some time, even with a psychogenic polydipsia, you may then induce a seizure. So you have to do this in secondary care. But the stage at this point would be a water deprivation test. Now, if the urine fails to concentrate, so it remains below 800, despite doing the water deprivation test, then we're more likely to have either a nephrogenic diabetes insipidus or a cranial diabetes insipidus. And of those two, the easier one to manage in some ways is actually your cranial diabetes insipidus, because you can synthetically replace the patient's ADH, and that would subsequently normalize the patient's urine osmolality. The challenge with nephrogenic diabetes insipidus is, despite giving them a synthetic ADH, the kidneys just will not respond to that ADH. So I hope you found this helpful. I know things like diabetes insipidus and SIADH can be complex and can be tricky to understand. We don't see them very much, in all honesty. But I hope you found this helpful, and I hope it helps just reinforce some of that knowledge that you already have. If you are finding this podcast series to be helpful, please do share this with your peers. Thank you. This podcast is hosted by wellmedic.co.uk. We help GP trainees pass the AKT.